So I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the cost of ownership for this vehicle and the previous owner, how much it cost me so far to perform the restoration, and a little bit about what those high ticket items were that needed to be performed to make this car essentially back to a factory original condition. Now, this previous owner had all of their service performed at the dealership where this car was actually purchased. And with that purchase, there was an oil discount program or oil change program where they didn't pay anything for oil changes. So if you factored in to the cost, the actual oil change cost, we would see a significantly higher cost of service. So this is a very interesting and very beneficial program because it maintained the car, made sure that the car continuously came into the dealership, but then additionally, there wasn't really any cost forwarded onto the owner as long as they had everything performed at the dealership. So there's some records missing from the cost of ownership. We do know that this car had aftermarket front struts added at some point, and there's not a record of that. So we do know that there is some incompleteness to the records, but for the most part, all the records were given to me when the ownership was handed over for this vehicle. When we look at the service records, I'll call out a couple high ticket items. There was the typical, recalls that were performed. There were typical service intervals that they hit. For example, there was the 15,000 mile service interval, and etc. There's more and more to that. But when we take a look at what was truly the costly items, there were very few. For example, there was what they called the Type C2 service, where there was a bunch of fluids that were changed, 21-point safety inspection, and that caught a couple items. So they had to do with some, maintenance related to that, new wipers, inspection, brake cleans, some alignment inspection and balances of wheels. That was $403, and that happened at 50,000 miles with this vehicle. Prior to that, there really wasn't any costly items. The owner had to get new rear brakes at one point. The owner had to get new front brakes at one point. Typical wear items that you would see. The owner had to pay $724 to get new tires put on. Not very good tires, I would say. They were, I think, Master Crafts, very inexpensive tires. There was the need for front calipers to be replaced, so that was $557, and with that there was new pads that they put on. Left rear caliper frozen at 59,000 miles. That cost $650 to have both sides replaced and new pads associated with that. We had the 60,000 mile service interval that costs $684. We really don't see any other costly items until we get to 71,000 miles, and that was a timing belt replacement and water pump. That cost the owner $1,176 when they had a $200 discount applied to that from the dealership manager. We had a valve adjustment performed at the same time. That was $496. Front brakes and pads were lubricated and replaced. Calipers were lubricated and the brakes were replaced. That's $415. There was a battery replacement shortly thereafter for $220. And that's really it up until 80,000 miles, so it's 20,000 miles later. This car currently has 96,000 miles on it, so we're getting pretty recent. Had a left front wheel bearing and speed sensor replacement. That was $985. I can vouch for that because what we'll get into, I just replaced the left front axle on this. We take the total cost of ownership associated with this car from the original owner. We find that the original owner paid about $10,525, so $10,525, for the cost of maintenance over the course of approximately 16, 17 years. with this car. So very interesting. I think we could probably add on about $1,000 because we do know that there was some maintenance performed that we don't have records for. Whether they were costly or not, it's unknown, but there was clearly some additional service provided to this car. So if we start to dive into what the restoration cost has been, and I will say that the restoration cost is completely void of any labor because I did all the labor associated with this service. I'll quickly run down this because I don't want to bore you guys, but it needed an oil pump gasket reseal and oil due to an oil leak, and VTEC solenoid gasket. There was 3 timing belt bolts missing. An exhaust downpipe needed to be replaced because the manifold gasket area was completely rusted out. 2 mufflers, left and right, obviously, needed to be replaced. They were rusted out at the manifold as well. Replacement lug nut, it was missing a lug nut. Purge valve solenoid, the one next to the charcoal canister, needed to be replaced. Miscellaneous bulbs in the dash needed to be replaced because they were burnt out. The OEM battery cover underneath the hood, this right here, was missing, so that needed to be purchased. Both left and right headlight assemblies needed to be replaced, and those were sourced OEM because of haze. The clutch pad, so what is actually over the metal pedal, the rubber pad needed to be replaced, and I replaced both the brake and the clutch at the same time because they're completely worn through. The 2-way evap purge valve needed to be replaced. It had a timing belt and tensioner replacement, not the water pump because it had just been done by the previous owner at about 70,000 miles and it only has 96 currently on it. Needed a new catalytic converter. It had an oil change done. It had a transmission fluid change, complete brake fluid flush and changeover. It had a map light fix, replaced the cabin air filter, and all of that came to a total of $2,242. So that was my first bill, and it was mostly parts, as you can see. And then moving on to the next one, so the laundry list continues. It was discovered that the rear beam of the front subframe was corroded out, and there was a previous video of this. I was able to get that and replace that. It needed a clip for the return hose, a clip for the accumulator hose, power steering high pressure housing O-ring needed to be replaced. Radius arm bushings needed to be replaced. Front sway bar bushings, left outer tie rod, right outer tie rod, front left sway bar links, front right sway bar links, I'm doing plural but it's singular. Front lower ball joints on both sides, front lower control arm, front right control arm, upper and lower, 2 axle nuts, and that totaled up to $582. The next bill was the coil overs, so not necessarily needing to be done. That was $680. At the same time, I had paintless dent removal performed on this car. That was $550. There's quite a few blemishes on this car. The evap canister needed to be replaced. The charcoal canister ended up needing to be replaced, and the screws associated with that. So if we take the total after all of that, we get to $4,830.88 so far for the cost to restore this car. So this car was originally $30,000, give or take, about $500 if I recall correctly. About $11,000 from the original owner to maintain this, plus an additional $4,800 for me to rebuild this. So if you take the total cost of the purchase price plus the restoration cost, you arrive at about $9,800 and some change, which is probably more than you would typically spend on a car like this. But since it's so rare, I figured, why not? I'm going to own it for some time, enjoy it for some time. My wife and I really consider this car to be quite a gem. So we like this car, and we don't see any reason why to sell it, and there's a lot of good good things about this car that not a lot of people know, so it obviously is a conversation starter for us. One of the things that I am looking forward to that I feel kind of foolish about not doing earlier when I had the subframe out and everything supported was doing a clutch replacement on this vehicle. I think that'll be a very interesting time. I don't think it'll be complicated in any way with the service manual that I have, as well as some of the prior knowledge that I have about working on cars. I think the clutch replacement on this will be pretty seamless and very easy. But you know, I felt that when I had the subframe out that there wasn't really a need to have that additional cost incurred, and so I, you know, forewent the clutch replacement. And additionally, I think, you know, with the clutch strong as it is, there's really it's premature to replace the clutch at this point. Might as well see how long. It'll be more interesting for me to see how long the clutch will last. To see if it, you know, goes into 150,000 miles, maybe 200,000 miles, and you know, make that part of the journey of this car and the documentation that this car will have. Is that you know, you can say confidently that an OEM clutch can last this long under the right conditions. As far as additional things that this car will see in the next upcoming months, we do know that the front end is going to get repainted. There's some cosmetic work that needs to be performed. There's a lot of rock chips, as well as previously discussed in the video, that the hood is in desperate need of replacement. So luckily OEM parts are still plentiful in the market space, so we will be replacing this hood, as well as repainting the entire front end clip of this car, and matching it and blending it in with the original paint, which we hope to preserve as long as we can. It's in really good condition, and after the paintless dent removal, there's really no need to do a full repaint. I may or may not include the trunk lid because it does have some oxidation. It's still up for debate, but we do know that that will cost about $2,700. So, you know, if we take the cost that I've already spent plus the $2,700, it's over the $10,000 mark. I'm aware of that, but you know, I think this car is worth it, and over time, this car will become, if not valuable from a market perspective, valuable from sentiment and just feelings overall about this car. I think it's worth it. And it, you know, it beats owning something more complicated and complex, I would say. So I hope you enjoyed this video. This month is maybe a little bit boring as far as an update on the video, on the car and its progress. There will be a more interesting video coming up. I will say that, highlight to that. So leave a comment below. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'm always willing to disseminate knowledge.